The rehearsal dinner was beautiful, and I mean genuinely beautiful. White linen tablecloths, candles in crystal holders, a five-course meal at the Harrington, one of the most exclusive event venues in Charlotte, North Carolina, a string quartet playing in the corner, champagne that costs more per bottle than my first car. And my father stood up from his seat at the head of that long, gleaming table, raised his glass, looked down at my brother Connor, who was sitting there in his custom navy blazer, grinning like a golden retriever, and my father said, with his whole chest into a room of 60 people, "To my son Connor, tonight we celebrate the beginning of the rest of your life. Your mother and I are so proud. We spared no expense for my favorite son." The room erupted in applause. And I sat there, third seat from the left, in a dress I bought myself, at a dinner I was not consulted about, clapping, smiling, doing what I had always done. Then my father sat back down, reached into the inside pocket of his suit jacket, pulled out a folded piece of paper, and slid it across the table, to me. I picked it up. It was a billing statement. $80,000. And at the top of that statement was my name, Ashley Marie Donovan, and below it, my credit card number, a card I had not handed to anyone, a card that had been in my wallet, a card that I had not given permission for anyone to use. My father leaned toward me, lowered his voice just enough that only I could hear him, and he said, with his whole chest, "You'll pay this, or you're dead to me." I looked at him. I looked down at that bill. I picked up my fork. I cut into my steak. I chewed slowly. I set the fork down. I reached into my clutch, pulled out my phone, checked the time, and then I looked back at my father and I said, "Interesting, because I reported that card as stolen to the FBI yesterday. And by the way, look out the window." Every head at the table turned. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Harrington's grand dining room, in the glow of the parking lot lights, 3 large catering vans had pulled up, and the staff, my catering staff, the ones I had called the night before, were calmly, professionally, systematically loading the buffet back onto their trucks. The shrimp cocktail? Gone. The carved roast station? Gone. The 6-tier wedding cake that was supposed to be unveiled at the end of the night, 2 men in black polos were wheeling it toward the loading dock. My brother Connor stood up so fast his chair scraped the marble floor, and then he choked on his champagne. That's where this story ends. But you need to understand where it starts, because the ending only makes sense when you know everything that came before it. My name is Ashley Donovan. I'm 34 years old. I'm a financial analyst. I own my home. I built my credit score from 580 to 811 by myself from scratch after my divorce at 26. And I want to tell you exactly how my own father stole $80,000 from me and how I got every single penny of my dignity back. Let me paint you a picture of my family. My father's name is Richard Donovan. Everyone calls him Rich, which the older I get, the more ironic that sounds. He's 62. He's a retired mid-level sales manager from a paper distribution company. He coaches Little League on weekends and goes to church every Sunday and shakes every hand in the parking lot on the way out. He's very well liked in our community. He is not someone you would look at and say, "That man is capable of financial fraud." But here's the thing about people like my father. The scariest financial predators don't look like criminals. They look like dads. They look like the kind of man who teaches you to ride a bike and cuts the crusts off your sandwiches and shows up to your school play. And then they use every single bit of that goodwill as currency. My mother's name is Diane. She loves my father. That is the most complete way I can describe her. She loves him the way some people love a religion, unquestioningly, even when the evidence piles up. She's not a bad person. I want to be clear about that. She's a woman who was raised to believe that her husband's word was the final word, and she has never once challenged that. And then there's Connor. My brother Connor is 30 years old, 4 years younger than me. He's handsome in that easy, effortless way that certain men are handsome. The kind of handsome that gets you out of parking tickets and into sold-out restaurants. He played baseball in high school, almost got a scholarship, didn't. He's been working at my father's friend's auto dealership for 6 years. He makes decent money. He spends all of it. Connor and I used to be close. When we were kids, I mean. He used to follow me around the neighborhood on his little bike with the training wheels. He used to crawl into my bed through thunderstorms. He used to call me Ash, and it sounded like something precious when he said it. I don't know exactly when that changed. I've spent a lot of time thinking about it. I think it changed gradually, the way the tide goes out. You don't notice until your feet are dry. Growing up, the differences in how my parents treated us were subtle, the kind of thing that as a child you explain away, you normalize, you file under, that's just how things are. Connor got the car for his 16th birthday. I got a card with $50 in it and a suggestion that I look into babysitting. Connor's college tuition was paid in full, state school, 4 years, board and room. I was told to figure it out, which I did. Loans, 2 jobs, academic scholarships. I graduated with honors and $31,000 in debt that took me 7 years to pay off. Connor's first apartment, my parents co-signed and helped with the deposit. When I moved into my first place, my father told me I was proud I was being independent. These things were never said outright. My parents never sat me down and said, "We love our brother more." It was quieter than that. It was the way my father's face changed when Connor walked in a room, the way my mother fussed over his plate at dinner, the way decisions were made around Connor's comfort, Connor's schedule, Connor's feelings. I was the responsible one, the capable one, the one who didn't need anything, which I've learned is a very convenient story for people who want to take advantage of you. Because if you don't need anything, then no one feels bad asking to handle more. I want to tell you the first time I recognized this pattern clearly. I was 22, senior year of college, finals week. I had 3 exams in 4 days and a group project presentation, and I hadn't slept more than 5 hours a night in 2 weeks. My father called me. He said that Connor had gotten into some trouble. Not serious trouble. Bar fight, the other guy started it. Connor was fine, no charges, but there were some legal fees, $1,500. He asked to wire it. I said, "Dad, I have $47 in my account until my next paycheck." He said, "I thought you were responsible." Like my poverty was a moral failing, like not having money to bail out my brother was evidence of my character flaw. I hung up, I cried, I called my best friend Melissa, and she said, "Ashley, that's not normal." And I filed that moment away, didn't act on it, didn't confront it, just filed it.
I was very good at filing things away back then. At 23, I graduated and moved to Charlotte, took a job at a mid-sized accounting firm, worked hard, got promoted, went back for my master's degree at night while working full-time. At 25, I married a man named Derek. That's a whole other story for a whole other day, but the short version is Derek was charming and I was 25, and charm is very convincing when you're young. We were married for 14 months. The divorce was civil. No kids, no major assets to fight over, just 2 people who had made a mistake and were honest enough to admit it before it cost them everything. The divorce did cost me something, though. It wrecked my credit. Derek had run up joint cards I didn't know about. When I found out, I had already signed for them. It took me years to untangle that. But I did. I rebuilt everything. I got a secured card, I paid it off every month, I got a small personal loan and paid it early, I tracked every dollar, I opened a high-yield savings account and set up automatic transfers, I read every financial literacy book I could find, I took a course. By 29, my credit was good. By 31, it was excellent. By 33, I had a credit score of 811 and a mortgage on a house I loved and a salary that made me feel, for the first time in my life, genuinely safe. I want you to understand what that safety meant to me. I grew up watching money be a source of tension and secrecy and shame. I grew up not knowing what my parents had or didn't have, watching my father make financial promises he sometimes couldn't keep, watching my mother smooth things over. I watched money make people anxious and dishonest. I decided I would never let money make me that way. I became someone who understood money, who tracked it, who protected it. My credit card, the one at the center of this story, was my primary card. I'd had it for 4 years, a Visa signature with a $30,000 limit that I had requested an increase on twice as my income grew. I used it for everything and paid it in full every month. My credit utilization stayed under 10%. I had never missed a payment. I had never carried a balance over 30 days. That card was a symbol of everything I had built, and my father used it to buy my brother a wedding. Let me tell you how. Connor got engaged in October. Her name is Brittany. She's 27, she's a dental hygienist, she has long blonde hair and a genuinely sweet laugh, and I actually liked her when I met her. I still like her, if I'm being honest. This was never about Brittany. The engagement was announced at a Sunday dinner at my parents' house. My mother had made pot roast. Connor came in holding Brittany's hand, and Brittany was holding her left hand slightly away from her body, the way newly engaged women do when they haven't shown you the ring yet. It was a beautiful ring. I said so. I meant it. My mother burst into tears immediately. My father shook Connor's hand and then pulled him into a hug that lasted a long time. There were photos. There was dessert that my mother had clearly prepared in advance because she already knew. I found out at the same time as the pot roast. I smiled through the whole thing. I hugged Brittany. I told her she was going to be the most beautiful bride. I meant that too. On the drive home, I felt a quiet, familiar ache that I had stopped letting myself name. Then the planning started. I will say this, Connor and Brittany did not have extravagant taste initially. Brittany showed me her Pinterest board once. It was lovely, understated. She wanted a venue with character, not pretension. She wanted good food, not a spectacle. She wanted her college friends and his baseball buddies and a dance floor and a good DJ. That was October. By December, my father took over. He started making calls. He had a vision. My father, who had never planned a party larger than a 4th of July cookout, decided that his son's wedding was going to be the event of the year. He wanted to show the community, his friends, his church, everyone, that the Donovans did things right. He booked the Harrington. If you're not from Charlotte, you don't know the Harrington, but let me explain. It is the kind of venue that has a waiting list. It is the kind of place where politicians have their fundraisers and CEOs hold their retirement parties. The base package for a Saturday wedding starts at $12,000. That's before food, before flowers, before anything. My father booked it for a Saturday in May. He did not tell Connor and Brittany what it cost. He told them it was taken care of. He also chose the Caterers, an upscale event catering company out of Raleigh that does, I will give them credit, extraordinary food. He chose the floral designer, he approved the menu, he hired a live band for the reception in addition to the DJ. Every decision, he made it bigger, more expensive, more impressive. And somewhere in there, somewhere between the venue deposit and the floral consultation, my father decided that the way he was going to pay for all of this was with my credit card. I did not know this was happening. Let me be extremely clear. I did not give my father my card. I did not give him my card number. I did not authorize any charges. I found out the same way anyone finds out their card has been compromised. I got a fraud alert. It was a Tuesday in February. I was at my desk at work, eating a sad desk lunch of leftover pasta, when my phone buzzed. It was a text from my credit company. Unusual activity detected. A charge of $4,200 was attempted at Harrington event venue. Was this you? I stared at that text for a full 15 seconds. Then I clicked no. My card was locked instantly. I called the number on the back. A woman named Sandra answered and walked me through the process. She told me there had been multiple charges attempted in the past 3 weeks, all flagged as unusual, and one that had gone through 12 days ago, $1,800 to something called Petal and Bloom Florals. Petal and Bloom Florals. I knew that name.
Brittany had mentioned it. She had been excited. She said her future father-in-law had chosen the most gorgeous floral designer for the wedding. I sat very still at my desk, and then I opened my banking app, and I scrolled, and I found it. One charge that had gone through before the alerts kicked in. $1,800. Petal and Bloom Florals. I put my lunch in the trash. I went to the bathroom. I locked myself in a stall. I sat down on top of the closed toilet lid, and I breathed for about 3 minutes. Then I called my father. He answered on the second ring. "Hey, Ash, what's up?" So casual, so warm, so completely normal. I said, "Dad, I got a fraud alert. Someone tried to charge $4,200 to my card at the Harrington, and there's an $1,800 charge from a florist." Silence. Not a long silence, maybe 2 seconds, but I felt it. Then he said, and I will never forget this, he said, "I was going to talk to you about that." And something in my chest went very, very cold. I said, "Talk to me about what exactly?" And he said, "The wedding is costing more than I expected. I knew you'd want to help. Your family, Ash. You're his sister. This is a big moment." I want you to notice what he did there. He didn't say he took it. He said he knew I'd want to help. He reframed stealing as generosity. He reframed my victimhood as volunteering. I said, "Dad, how did you get my card number?" He hesitated again. Then, "You left your wallet at the house at Christmas. I wrote it down. I was going to put it back before you noticed." Christmas was 6 weeks earlier. He had written down my card number 6 weeks ago and had been slowly using it to book a wedding. I said, "Dad, that's credit card fraud." He said, and this is the part that still makes my jaw tighten when I think about it, he said, "Don't be dramatic, Ashley. It's family. You have the money. You make good money. This is your brother's wedding." I said, "I'm going to need you to pay me back the $1,800 that already went through." He said, "We'll talk about it at the rehearsal dinner." And he hung up. I stood in that bathroom for another 5 minutes. Then I washed my hands, went back to my desk, and started making a plan. The rehearsal dinner was 3 months. 3 months. And here is the thing you need to understand about me. I did not act immediately. I know that might frustrate some of you. I know some of you are sitting there thinking, "Why didn't you just report it right then?" And the honest answer is, because he's my father. Because even when someone hurts you, when they're your parent, there is this pull, this hope that I had seen enough of his face, enough of the man who taught me to ride a bike and drove me to school when I missed the bus, that maybe this was a misunderstanding. Maybe he would make it right. Maybe if I gave him space and time and the benefit of the doubt he had never really earned but I kept offering anyway, he would step up. I kept the card blocked. That was non-negotiable. No more charges were going through. I filed an initial report with my card company's fraud department. I told them I wanted to hold on pressing further while I attempted to resolve it within the family. They flagged it. They gave me a case number. Then I waited. I called my mother 2 weeks after the conversation with my father. She said, "Oh, Ashley, you know how much this wedding means to your father. He just wants the best for Connor. Can't you just let this one go?" Let this one go. She said it like I was holding a grudge over a borrowed sweater, not like my identity had been used to rack up charges without my consent. I called Connor. That was the conversation that closed the door for me. He picked up on the first ring. He sounded happy. He sounded like someone who had no idea. And for a moment, for just a moment, I thought maybe he genuinely didn't. I said, "Connor, did you know Dad has been charging wedding expenses to my credit card?" Pause. Then, "He said you offered." I said, "I didn't offer." Another pause. Then he said, "Ash, this is the biggest day of my life. Can you please not make it about you?" There it was. The sentence I had been hearing in some version my entire life. Can you please not make it about you? Like my financial violation was a personality trait. Like the theft of my identity and my money was my drama, my thing, my constant need to center myself. I said, "Okay, Connor," and I hung up. and I cried. I won't pretend I didn't. I cried for about an hour. I called Melissa, and she came over, and we sat on my kitchen floor, and she let me cry. And then she said, "What do you want to do?" And I told her. She looked at me. She said, "Ashley Marie Donovan, you absolute legend." Here is what I did over the next 12 weeks. First, I got all the documentation. I pulled every statement. I identified every charge, the one that went through and all the attempted ones. I got the vendor names, the dates, the amounts. I built a spreadsheet. Of course I built a spreadsheet. I'm a financial analyst. The spreadsheet was immaculate. Second, I contacted every vendor my father had attempted to book using my card, the ones where the charges had been declined. I called them, identified myself as the cardholder, and asked them to confirm. Had a Richard Donovan attempted to book services using a card ending in the numbers I gave them? Most confirmed it. I documented those conversations. Third, and this is the part that required the most patience, I made a decision about the rehearsal dinner. My father's approach to this whole situation was to delay. We'll talk at the rehearsal dinner. He thought that if I could get me to the dinner in a public setting surrounded by family and friends the night before Connor's wedding, I would be too uncomfortable, too conflict averse, too concerned about causing a scene, to do anything real. He had spent 34 years training me to be that person. He had miscalculated. About 6 weeks before the rehearsal dinner, I made 2 important calls. The first call was to the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center. Credit card fraud, especially when it involves the use of another person's card information without authorization, falls under federal jurisdiction. I filed a formal complaint. I submitted all my documentation. I was given a case number and assigned to an agent named Rourke, who was professional and thorough, and did not seem surprised at all that a family member was involved. Agent Rourke told me that they would investigate. He told me that the complaint would be on record. He advised me on my next steps. Then I called the catering company my father had booked for the rehearsal dinner, a company called Magnolia Events and Catering. I had a very interesting conversation with their contracts manager. Her name was Deb. Deb was a practical, no-nonsense woman who, when I explained the situation, said, and I'm paraphrasing slightly, "So the card used to pay the deposit belongs to you, the cardholder did not authorize the charges, and the card has been reported as compromised?" I said, "That's correct."
She said, "And you want to know what our policy is when a charge is reversed or disputed?" I said, "I do." She told me. And then I asked her a question, and she said she'd have to speak with her manager. She called me back in 2 days. The answer was yes. I wore a green dress. I want you to know that detail because it matters to me. It was a deep hunter green, fitted, with a small gold clasp at the shoulder. I bought it specifically for that night. I sat in the dressing room of the boutique and I thought, wear something you feel powerful in. I tried on 4 dresses. I chose the green one. I did my own makeup. I drove myself. I did not drink anything on the way there. The Harrington looked extraordinary. I'll give my father that. Whatever else he was, he had taste. Or at least he had expensive taste, which is sometimes mistaken for the same thing. The floral arrangements were genuinely stunning. The table was set beautifully, the lighting was warm and flattering, the string quartet was playing something I didn't recognize but that felt like money. I arrived at exactly 6:53 p.m. I hugged my mother. She looked relieved to see me, which told me she'd been worried I might not come. I hugged Brittany. She looked radiant. She looked like a woman who was 1 day away from a wedding she was excited about and had no idea her father-in-law had paid for it with stolen money. I shook hands with Brittany's parents, Jim and Carol, nice people from Greensboro. Carol complimented my dress. I found my seat. My father came over to me within the first few minutes. He was in a dark gray suit. He looked pleased with himself in the way that men who have gotten away with things often look pleased with themselves. He patted my shoulder. He said, "Glad you're here, sweetheart." I smiled. I said, "Wouldn't miss it."
I want to tell you what I felt in that moment because I think it's important. I wasn't nervous. That surprised me. I had expected to feel nervous. Instead, I felt something more like stillness, like I was standing in the eye of a storm that I had manufactured, and I knew exactly where the walls were. The dinner began. The first two courses were lovely: lobster bisque, arugula salad with shaved parmesan and candied walnuts. I ate everything. I talked to Brittany's maid of honor, a woman named Kayla who was getting her PhD in biomedical engineering. Fascinating person. We talked about interest rates and housing markets for 15 minutes. Then, my father stood up. He tapped his glass with a spoon. The room quieted. He gave the toast I described at the beginning. We spared no expense for my favorite son. He said it, in front of 60 people, his favorite son. 4 years of every birthday, every holiday, every phone call where I had quietly hoped to be seen, and he said it out loud, like it was something to be proud of. Across the table, I watched my mother smile and dab her eyes. I clapped, I smiled, I raised my glass. Then my father sat down, reached into his jacket, and slid the bill across the table. I looked at it. The total was $82,417. The $1,800 charge that had gone through originally, the venue, the caterer, the florals, the band deposit, the rehearsal dinner itself, which apparently ran about $14,000, all of it, itemized with my name at the top. "You'll pay this or you're dead to me." He said it quietly. His voice was pleasant. He was still half smiling from the toast. I looked at that bill for a long moment. Then I looked at my father. I picked up my fork. I cut into my fillet. I chewed slowly. It was an excellent fillet, perfectly seasoned, cooked to exactly medium rare. I want to acknowledge that even in the most stressful moment of my adult life, good steak is good steak. I finished the bite. I set the fork down. I reached into my clutch. I pulled out my phone. I checked the time. 8:47 p.m. I had told Deb from Magnolia Events to begin at 8:45 p.m. I looked at my father. I said, "That's interesting, Dad, because I reported that card as stolen to the FBI yesterday. I have a case number, and the agent assigned to my case has all of the documentation, including the vendor records confirming you used my card information, which you took from my wallet in my coat at Christmas." The table next to us had gone quiet. I kept my voice conversational, not raised, just clear. I said, "Oh, and by the way," I nodded toward the windows. "Look outside." What happened in the next 90 seconds is something I will describe to my grandchildren someday. Every head at that table turned toward the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the Harringtons' grand front entrance and its side parking area. 3 Magnolia Events vans had pulled up. 6 staff members in black polo shirts were moving with calm, professional efficiency. 2 of them were wheeling out the buffet setup that was staged for post-dinner service. Another was carrying a large tray of past appetizers back to the van. 2 more emerged from a side door with the dessert tower, an elaborate, towering chocolate and vanilla confection that had been arranged on a special display table in the corner of the room. And last, carried carefully by a man in gloves, came the rehearsal dinner centerpiece cake, a smaller version of the wedding cake design, with sugar flowers and Connor and Brittany's initials in gold. Out the door, into the van. The van doors closed. The vans drove away. My brother Connor had stood up from his seat. He was staring out the window. His mouth was open. Champagne was running down his chin because he had in fact choked on it. My father was standing now too. His face had gone from red to a color I can only describe as thunderstorm. Brittany looked confused. Carol, her mother, looked confused. Jim had his hands on the table like he was bracing for impact. The string quartet, bless them, kept playing. My father turned to me. He said, "Ashley?" I said, "The caterers have a policy, Dad, when a deposit is paid with a card that the cardholder disputes, and when the cardholder contacts them in advance to confirm the dispute and cancellation of services, they recover their equipment." They were very understanding when I explained the situation. Deb was particularly helpful. I stood up. I picked up my clutch. I said, "The venue bill is yours, Dad. The band deposit is yours. All of it. Because you booked it, not me." I looked at Connor. He was staring at me like he'd never seen me before. Maybe he hadn't. I said, "Congratulations on your wedding tomorrow, Connor. I genuinely hope it's everything you wanted." And I walked away. My phone started ringing before I reached my car. I silenced it. I drove to Melissa's house. She had a bottle of wine open and 2 glasses on the counter. She knew I was coming. I had texted her, "It's done." We sat in her living room for 4 hours. I cried twice, once out of relief and once out of grief. I want to be honest with you about both of those things. The relief makes sense. The grief might be harder to understand. But here's the truth. When you finally hold your ground with someone who has spent your entire life undermining it, when you finally stop absorbing the blow and redirect it, there is grief in that, because it closes a door. It means you know now who they are. You can't unknow it. You can't go back to pretending. My father left 12 voicemails that night. The first few were angry. "How dare you? You embarrassed this family. You humiliated your brother on the eve of his wedding." The middle ones were threatening. He was going to call a lawyer. He was going to sue me for the deposits he lost. He was going to tell everyone what I had done. The last few were something else, quieter, more desperate. One of them, I've listened to it several times since, he said, "Ashley, you're my daughter. You know I would do anything for this family." Anything for this family. He did not say, "anything for you."
Connor called once. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail that said the rehearsal dinner had dissolved into chaos, that Brittany was upset, that her parents had offered to step in for some costs, and that he needed me to call him back. I texted him, "I'm sorry Brittany is upset. That was never my intention. This was between me and Dad. I hope your wedding is beautiful." He did not respond. Here is what happened over the following weeks. The wedding happened. I wasn't there. I hadn't been invited before any of this, which I'd noted but hadn't said anything about, so my absence was not a new development so much as a confirmation of the existing math. From what I heard through my Aunt Linda, who is my mother's sister and the family's most reliable news source, the wedding went on. It was scaled back significantly from what my father had originally planned. A lot of the premium additions he'd arranged were now in limbo without paid deposits. But Connor and Brittany got married. They had cake. There was dancing. I'm glad. The FBI investigation moved forward. Agent Rourke contacted me twice in the month following the rehearsal dinner with questions. I provided all documentation. I was told that an interview with my father had been scheduled. My father hired a lawyer. His lawyer sent me a letter suggesting that this had been a family misunderstanding and inviting me to resolve it privately without further legal involvement. I forwarded the letter to Agent Rourke. My credit card company reversed the original $1,800 charge and credited it back to me. The case is marked as fraud. It is on record. My father did not pay me back. My mother called me 3 weeks after the rehearsal dinner. She cried. She asked me how I could do this to our family. She asked me what she was supposed to tell people. I said, "Tell them the truth, Mom." She said, "The truth would hurt your father." I said, "He hurt me first." She cried more. I love my mother. I believe she loves me in the way people love you when it doesn't cost them anything. But I have also accepted, and this has been the hardest acceptance of my adult life, that she is not capable of choosing me. She has never been capable of choosing me. That's not something I can fix. It's something I have to live with.
Connor and I have exchanged maybe a dozen texts since. They are cordial and distant in the way texts between people who used to be close and are now strangers are cordial and distant. He said once, "You could have handled it differently." I wrote back, "So could Dad." He left that on read. People ask me, when I tell this story, people ask me if I regret it. And I want to give you the honest answer, which is more complicated than yes or no. Do I regret the way it affected Brittany? Yes. She was innocent in this. She was a woman who deserved a beautiful wedding celebration and instead got chaos and confusion on the night before her wedding because the men around her had made choices that had nothing to do with her. I regret that she experienced that. If I could have found a way to protect her from it, I would have. Do I regret the loss of the relationship with my brother? I grieve it. That's different from regret. Regret implies I would have chosen differently. Grief implies I understand the cost and carry it anyway. Connor and I could have been close. That's the loss. That's what I sit with. Do I regret confronting my father? No, not for a single second. Here is what I learned, what I know now that I did not fully know before. The people in your life who call you dramatic when you enforce your own boundaries are the people who benefited most from you having none. The people who say, "This is family," when you resist exploitation are the people using family as a cover story. The people who call it a misunderstanding when they get caught are the people who would never have stopped if you had stopped them. My father did not make a mistake. Mistakes are accidents. He saw my card number, he wrote it down, he waited 6 weeks, he used it systematically over time for specific purchases. He planned it, he executed it. And his plan for the confrontation was to put me in a room full of people and threaten to disown me, calculating that I would rather absorb $82,000 of debt than cause a scene. He did not make a mistake. He made a choice, and so did I. I chose to know my own worth. I chose to protect what I had built. I chose to stop waiting for the father I deserved and start responding to the father I had. I chose to call the Caterers. And I want to say one more thing, for anyone listening who recognizes something in this story, anyone who has a person in their life who calls your self-protection drama, who calls your boundaries cruelty, who calls your refusal to be exploited betrayal. You are not dramatic. You are not cruel. You are not a bad daughter or son or sibling or spouse or friend. You are someone who decided that love does not require you to let yourself be robbed, and that is not a small decision. I know it doesn't feel like strength from the inside. From the inside, it feels terrifying and sad and lonely and like you're standing at the edge of something with no railing. But you can stand there. I promise you, you can stand there. My name is Ashley Donovan. I'm 34 years old. My credit score is 811. My house is paid on time every month. My car is paid for. My savings account is full. And the caterers took the cake. Thanks for listening.